FM. State Senator Nicole Akins Boyd is joining us now. It's great to meet you. Thanks for coming in today.
Delighted to be in today.
So I saw that you're an Oxford girl, and you also went to Mississippi State, so you're really kind of hedging your bets every sports season.
Well, I grew up in Oxford and learned quickly to yell hotty toddy growing up in Oxford, but I did go to undergraduate at Mississippi State and enjoyed it there. But I have really enjoyed being home in Oxford and getting to yell at all those great games. We had some great ones this weekend, some close calls, and so being in Oxford's always a great time in the spring.
Where do your loyalties lie during the Egg Bowl?
There is no question. I represent the University of Mississippi. It is in my district, so I have to yell hotty toddy. And my husband, who, just to make this more interesting, my husband is a former Mississippi State football player, and he actually is one of the orthopedists for the University of Mississippi. So anyway, that works with the teams, and he always makes sure that he is rooting for his players that are on the field. So just to make it all the more interesting.
That's like a Game of Thrones situation.
Yeah. We always are yelling for our Mississippi teams, though, when they're not playing each other.
It's been weird for me cheering for the Mississippi teams this past weekend in baseball because I'm an Alabama Crimson Tide guy.
Oh.
But I know, right? But I got to tell you, I have become a Lane Kiffin fan. I was not a fan of Lane when he was Alabama's OC. And I lived in Hattiesburg for quite a few years. So I love to see Southern Miss doing well. It was a great weekend to watch sports. Unfortunate ending, but I will be cheering for the Tide whenever they play a Mississippi school.
I don't know if we can forgive you for that. So
I know. Well, this is a much shorter conversation than I expected to have. Look, Senator, I wanted to talk with you about the opioid settlement money and the state, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's just start with the obvious, the special session last week. Walk us through from your perspective what happened to the special session. I know that you were one of the people in the state Senate who were upset that the House did their job and just kind of left town, creating maybe a little bit of tension there between the two chambers. But take us behind the scenes on the Senate action to get the budget done.
Well, the House and the Senate have been working together since we left, and as I say, we had to come back for summer school. Because we didn't quite get the job done. And so they had been working behind the scenes. And so and I've heard all these various things about transparency among the members and all of that. The Senate received the proposed finalized budget the Sunday before we came in. So we had ample time to really look at it, ask questions. I was calling people on the holiday and Memorial Day, asking particular questions about budgets and all of that. So we had a little bit more time to work. We had some pretty good time to kind of ask our questions and then call state agencies to find out, different provisions and stuff like that. So, passing the budget and passing the legislature, they always say it's a sausage-making process, and it is. We have a budget now. We have a budget that is a conservative budget because we don't know what's going to happen with the federal level. It is passed. It is done. And we have to move forward. There were some things and some cuts in there that I was not particularly, thrilled about, particularly as the chair of universities and colleges, I don't like to see, I wanted to see more money in there for them, particularly in regards to maintenance and building and projects and things like that. But that was not the case this year. And we will come back and we will fight next year to try to get those done. But we did pass a conservative budget. We made sure that, that we're going to be in good shape financially. Despite whatever happens in Washington with federal cuts and different things like that. And so it's the process. We need to always work together. It doesn't benefit the taxpayers for the Senate and the House to be fighting with each other. That's a lose for the taxpayer, and that's a lose for the citizens. So I think we are work. And also, too, though, I will say, too, I'm not afraid for us to have disagreements. I think that winds up in a better...
That's healthy.
I think it is too. And I think we're too afraid of that sometimes right now, is to have these healthy debates. And we did. We had a very robust, healthy debate. Are you going to fund local projects? Or are you not going to fund local projects? Are you going to fund state projects? Or are you not? And so this is where we are. And we're moving forward. So I'm sure there will be some. I'm at the Legislative Budget Committee, and I think you will see some healthy debate again coming in September. And I think that's great. That's what we should be doing here.
What I'm hearing from some of your colleagues are the frustrations that the executive branch, that the governor has perhaps too much power over the purse. Do you see that uneven balance in the power over budgeting in the governor's office?
Well, now let me say this. We handed the governor the power of the purse. When we left without a budget and required him to bring us back in, we gave the governor the power of the purse. And so
and the push.
And the push. So if my colleagues don't like that, we have to own responsibility that we did this. And so if they don't want to do it again, then we've got to make sure we work together and get that budget before we leave.
When it comes to spending, some states are looking at a state version of the RAINS Act. Is that something Mississippi is considering? Would you advocate for a RAINS Act, and maybe explain what the RAINS Act is for people when it comes to how Mississippi might approach it?
I think it's way too early, and you can probably look at some more clarity in that. I think that there's lots of talks going around on different things all the way around, and I'm not ready to delve off into all the different ideas that people have on these right now.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen in other states that it certainly provides for more accountability and transparency on large expenditures in the states that have followed through with a RAINS Act. And even at the federal level, if Congress is able to get this done, just requiring about more congressional approval for major regulations that impact business owners in the state or on a national level.
Yeah, I think, look, transparency, and I've heard there's various things been said about the Senate non-transparent. Look, when we came into office in 2020, the Senate has been more than transparent. Our hearings are all publicly available, and I'll remind the public on YouTube. Our budget hearings are all available on the legislative website, which is on YouTube. And all of our committee hearings and most of our subcommittee hearings are all available on YouTube. And so I think there were some speakers earlier this week that said, oh, the Senate's not transparent. The Senate is very transparent, and we have all of our committee meetings online so you can hear them and you can watch them and you can see the questions being asked and all of that. And I encourage the public to go do that. So I have a lot of constituents who actually do this, and I think we need more transparency in the state, period, from all of our boards and commissions and all of that. I've proposed legislation for a couple of years that we make sure that every state agency board is online so the public can watch it and that they know what's going on in the state government, and they don't have to come down to Jackson or wherever it is to go sit in those board meetings. They can be public for the public to hear. And that is easy technology to do now, and it doesn't cost a lot.
Someone wants to know, and you may not know the answer to this, when the Highway 7 construction from Oxford to the 9-7 roundabout will begin. That apparently is a little bit of a traffic snafu in the area.
It's a traffic snafu. Look, we were so blessed to receive last year in the legislative appropriation the money to complete the 4-laning of Highway 7 from the 7 and 9 split. And I am told that we should be able to start that by the end of the year is kind of my latest update on that. And they've had some issues with moving some utilities and a couple of things like that. But that is when I'm told it should start. So we've got some major construction there going on right now off of Highway 7 into Oxford. So we've got a couple of major construction projects already kind of in the works in that. So, but hopefully that 9-7 split to the bridge will start maybe at the end of the year.
If it's not done by football season, you could put some big screen TVs up there for everybody stuck in traffic to watch the games.
That might be what I have a very
massive tailgate party right there on the highway.
Absolutely. That'd be a great idea.
I want to get into the opioid settlement money next and the opioid crisis in the state. State Senator Nicole Akins Boyd here on Mornings with Richard Cross. Scott Sands in SuperTalk, Mississippi. My name is Scott Sands. Flattered to be invited to guest host for Richard here on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Before we get back to our guest, I couldn't help but notice I think somebody is flirting with Lance on the C Spire text line.
It happens every now and again. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Somebody just being nice.
Very
to
desirable
me.
man.
No,
I
think somebody just being nice. That's all. But thank you. Thanks for the compliments. I appreciate them. Keep them coming.
State Senator Nicole Akins Boyd is joining us on Super Talk Mississippi. The story that caught my attention about you, and it's nice to meet you, is what's happening with the opioid settlement in the state of Mississippi. I think the state is getting about $260 million in settlement money, and you've been the lead sponsor of at least one bill. So let's just start. What's motivated you to take a leadership role on this particular issue?
Well, this is a bill that I was happy to work with and there was a companion bill in the House, and as you know, in our process in the legislature, it's either a House bill or a Senate bill. And so this happened to be a Senate bill, but I worked very closely with House leadership in this. The chairman of the Public Health Committee, Sam Creekmore, in helping how we were going to structure these settlement monies. I have a little bit of experience with this. I worked a number of years ago in the state attorney general's office when we had the tobacco settlement. And so I'm very familiar with settlement dollars and how those need to be reported and what you need to do to make sure that you are in compliance with the court orders on that. And then also, too, I have been chairing a Women, Children's, and Families Committee study group for the Senate for the last several years now. And so opioid issues constantly comes up in those particular issues. I also live in a university community, and we have been extremely impacted by the opioid crisis within this state and this nation. And so, I mean, it is... we were thrilled to see the Attorney General be one of the first states to really go after these companies and look at their predatory practices of what they, were doing, and really go after them. So we have a settlement now, and $259 million will be looked at through this committee over the next few years. And so we established what we did is a 15-person council, kind of advisory council that will advise the legislature on how these expenditures need to be made. And on this committee, too, we also did 22 larger advisory council members to that council. Because opioid addiction is a complex issue. I understand you have a number of a great deal of experience with this too, Scott. So maybe I need to be interviewing you on this issue.
It's interesting. So I am the chairman of the board for the Sheriff's Office Drug Abuse Response Team in Lucas County, where I live, and the state of Ohio, where I am, has taken a unique approach, and I couldn't find a program like the DART unit in Mississippi. Maybe there is one in a county or a city somewhere, but the DART unit and in Wood County, which is Bowling Green, Ohio, Cincinnati, Columbus, several other cities across Ohio have these interdiction teams that are made up of law enforcement. But when they go out to respond to an overdose, they're not arresting the drug user. They're taking them in to get treatment. They're taking them to one of the available mental health facility beds that has a bed available. And then these sheriff's deputies stay with those clients through the entire process. They're with them almost as a sponsor to make sure that they pursue treatment and are there on call, in some cases, 24 hours a day. And that not only, I think, builds ties and trust with law enforcement, but really shows how important it is to stop the addiction, to stop the problem in the state where it begins, and that's with the users and with mental health problems in the state, and not just throwing them in jail where they're likely to relapse and continue to use drugs, even in jail in some cases.
Well, and that's exactly what we want to make sure that we're looking at programs just like that across the state. We have law enforcement that is on actually that voting member board, and then we have advisors to that that can do programs like that. One of the things I've looked at.
Are there? I saw one critic of the advisory council that, and maybe this is wrong, there was nobody on the council that actually has any lived experience with addiction. Is that true?
Well, there's nobody that is designated by that tag as a voting member. However, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House all have appointees to these committees, and they're kind of open-ended as to who those individuals can be. So, and then we also have some other individuals on there. So, I think you may see by the time that these appointees are made, you may have some people that definitely have some lived experiences. I think we may already have some that have some lived experiences with this, but we do have members of the advisory committee that definitely have some lived experiences with this. So I think that's incredibly important, is to kind of hear from those that are in recovery. But I also think you've got to look at this multifaceted, because one of the things that I've worked really hard with over the last few years is CPS. And the number of children that are coming into CPS because of opioid addiction has dramatically increased. And so this is an issue that affects everything. And
well, there are so many tentacles in the opioid problem, and we're in some cases seeing opioid overdoses decline, but the bigger problem becomes something like fentanyl. And as the border is more secure and there are fewer drugs coming into to the country, hopefully that will help to a certain extent. But addiction is a serious disease, and if you want to use the drugs, you're going to find the drugs. And this crisis has not only touched, as you said, CPS and children, senior citizens, the housing system, the judicial system, medical care, mental health, all have a role to play in treating the crisis.
They do. And I mean, you talked about our senior citizens. We see senior citizens with addiction issues, but we also see 2.5 million grandparents are raising their children now just because of drug addictions of those parents. I mean, that's an incredible figure that you're thinking and talking about. And you mentioned fentanyl. We see right now, particularly in a university community, 70% of all of our opioid deaths are because of fentanyl. Now, we hope as our borders continue that with the president cracking down on our open borders, that we see less fentanyl that is coming across the borders, because we know that has been a tremendous problem. And
it's being infused in everything.
Absolutely.
I mean, from counterfeit drugs to heroin and other opioids. In some cases, it's even being infused with marijuana on the black market, which is why some states have moved to legalize marijuana, just simply to make that drug safer, if you know what you're buying, rather than getting it on the streets.
Well, you see it infused absolutely into everything. And so we've taken a broad spectrum with our advisory council, looking at all of those things, looking at our law enforcement, obviously. I'm greatly concerned right now because I hear some of the federal cuts that are coming down may affect our drug courts. And so, and that's where you see really the impact of the bad decision making and the addiction issues that are involved with this. I was talking with our mental health centers, our community mental health centers last week, and they're starting to feel the pain of those cuts and what that's going to do for those treatment issues and stuff like that. So we're very hopeful that...
And all of those agencies need to play a role in treating the crisis. Drug courts need to provide an option to addicts who come before the judges to seek treatment rather than going to jail. Emergency rooms should, in some cases, perhaps be required to report this to get them into treatment with units available, like the DART unit in Lucas County or some of the other interdiction teams with law enforcement. And rather than punish them, punish the users, get them the help that they need and follow them through the process. Don't drop them off at a facility, get them a bed, and then you're done with it. You don't wash their hands, because it's a process. It could be years before somebody can overcome the ties to addiction, and even then it's always there.
Well, and some of the most efficacious programs you see are with mothers who come in voluntarily once they've gotten pregnant, and they need to get off opioids, and they can do this in a healthy manner. It is not easy, but and it has to be very closely medically monitored. But what they see is high rates of success when those mothers get off while they're pregnant. You see a very, very low return rate of those mothers going back to addictive addiction and all of that. So that's one of the things. And we don't simply have enough beds of those in Mississippi to really help those mothers that want to get help proactively.
I got to tell you, there are it seems like there are never enough beds anywhere in the country, and that's alarming.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of infrastructure to build within the state to really support and make sure that we can do this. This money will be a great help. We've got a good team. And I really do like the process that we've set up with the legislature. We played with it for a long time. And I think it's a really good process that will give a check and balance to making sure that we get this money spent the most efficacious as possible.
All right, I know you've probably got a job, but we only got a 5 or 6 minute segment left this hour. Can you stick around for one more?
I can stick around.
State Senator Nicole Akins Boyd. It's Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi. It's great to have State Senator Nicole Akins Boyd here on Mornings with Richard Cross. I'm Scott Sands. You've been a pretty key figure in Medicaid reform. You're vice chair, I believe, of the Senate Medicaid Committee. Medicaid has not been fully expanded yet in Mississippi. Where do you stand on supporting or not expansion, and what kind of conditions might you advocate for?
Well, I think right now there is an unknown of what's going to really happen in D.C. in regards to this. So you can't really say one way or the other. I will say this, the Senate's position was last time, and I fully am supportive of this, is there was no increase of expansion. And technically kind of what we looked at in the Senate was not really a full expansion. It was really covering those people that are kind of in a gap coverage that are basically that didn't have any type of access to the exchange or were not covered under traditional Medicaid. And so there's a gap right there in the middle. And that's what really the Senate looked at doing. But we didn't. The thing that we were very adamant about is that you had to see a strong work requirement, that this just couldn't be something that if the feds didn't approve that it would go away. And I've been interested in following Arkansas now with what they're proposing over there. And we feel really strongly that if we're going to offer that type of coverage, you've got to have some type of work requirement. And the work requirement that we had, I felt very good about because it also kind of was a hybrid too, that if you were taking classes, but you're only, employed part-time, those could qualify as well. But we were very interested in really trying to shore up that gap. And that would not have brought us to full expansion with that. It would have just covered those people that are in that gap right now. Because as you know, the exchange covers people that were up to that 100 to, I think it was 128%. They covered those people, but it's those people that were just under that 100% that there's a little bit of a gap in right there. So
where does this need for Medicaid reform intersect with the need for PBM reform in the state?
You've hit the you've hit the topic this morning. I don't think those two things really interact per se. Well, maybe they do, but I kind of look at those as kind of two separate issues with that. Look, we know that there is a massive problem right now, what is happening to our local pharmacists across the state, and they are being very much edged out by these PBMs. This is something that really the federal government has failed to act on, and now it's being pushed to the states to do this. And because there's not sunshine in this process, there's
really no transparency in pricing.
There's no transparency, and they are
spread pricing is a major problem across the industry.
Yes, and we do hear our industries coming in and saying, yes, and this is going to cost us so much more money, but it's not been a transparent process. And so there needs to be transparency. And I was greatly disappointed this year that we could not get at least some transparency aspect to what is going on. I thought that was just a small step that we could have taken to really see what we could do to really understand this issue more, because I think there's a lot about this issue still, as much as we talk about it, that we don't have all the facts on. And I thought that at least if we could have gotten that transparency piece in place, we could have really had a better knowledge base on what we were doing. And the transparency.
Well, and that's the problem, not just for you in the legislature to try to figure out how to handle the problem, but as consumers, we have absolutely zero transparency from the healthcare industry.
Exactly. And so that was a piece, the transparency was a piece, was something that everybody agreed to. Was so you didn't have really strong opposition on that transparency piece. But in the politics of it all, once again, that transparency piece got left on the table, and it's got left on the table 2 years in a row. And so that's super frustrating as a legislator, because you want to try to govern, you want to try to pass laws with the most information as possible, because you know that you're going to make better laws with regards to that. And leaving that transparency piece on the table was just something that was greatly disappointing to me. As we go back through, and this issue will come up again, and yet we still don't have all the information we really need. But what I do know is my hometown and my independent pharmacists are withering on the vine right now, because
are there?
Yeah,
we're short on time here. Are there any states that Mississippi could model that have done PBM reform successfully?
Well, I think everybody's kind of got, I'm not going to say anybody's, quote, successful at this point in time.
Right.
I think every state has a number of different things, and you'll hear somebody say that a state is good, and then you start digging into it, and it's really not that good. So I think there's a lot to learn. I still think, but it is going to be an issue that we're going to bring back next year, and we're going to try to see what we can do to make sure we get better options in our state.
You know, I'm not a conspiracy guy, but I certainly think that there is some truth, if not at a state level, and I can't speak specifically to Mississippi, but at the federal level, from big pharma money and lobby money that's preventing some of these needed reforms from actually taking place.
I don't think you have to be a conspiracist to think that. I think that's just calling it like it is. So
common sense.
Exactly. So yeah, if they wanted us, if they wanted to, I don't think you have to be. I'm not going to call you a conspiracist on that one this morning, Scott. So I
State
think
Senator Nicole Akins Boyd, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much for coming in. I'd love to continue this conversation, and I'll text you if you want to hear more about the DART unit.
I want to hear a lot more about it. I want to interview you. So thank you.
We'll talk soon. News is next.